"This house isn't yours," my daughter-in-law shouted, her voice sharp enough to cut through the silence of the dining room. "You need to leave, now." My son didn't argue. He didn't even look at me, he just nodded. "The house was always Dad's," he added quietly, "and now, it's mine." I didn't say a word. I stood up from the table we had used for Sunday dinners for over 30 years. Folded my napkin, and placed it beside my untouched plate. Then I walked upstairs, packed a single suitcase, and left that house without looking back. The next morning, I went to the bank. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end. And tell me where you're watching from. I've learned that distance doesn't matter. Pain travels far enough on its own." The house had never felt so quiet as it did that night. It wasn't just the silence. It was the absence of something that had once filled every corner: my husband's presence. Harold had been gone for exactly 9 days. 9 days since the funeral. 9 days since I stood beside his grave, holding myself together while everyone else cried. At 72, I thought I understood loss. I thought I was prepared. I wasn't prepared for this. The dining room still smelled faintly of rosemary and roasted chicken. The dinner I had spent hours preparing. My daughter-in-law, Claire, had barely touched her plate. She had been waiting for the right moment. I could see it now, the way she kept glancing at my son. The way her fingers tapped against her glass. She wasn't grieving. She was calculating. "Pass the salt," she had said earlier, her tone casual, almost bored, no softness, no sympathy, just impatience. My son, Daniel, sat beside her like a man already convinced of something he hadn't witnessed himself. He used to sit across from me, asking about my day, telling me about work, about the smallest details of his life. That man was gone. In his place sat someone distant, someone who couldn't meet my eyes. "Mom," he said at one point, his voice hesitant, "we've been talking." Claire placed her hand over his. A small gesture, but it said everything. They had already decided. I just hadn't been told yet. The house felt different after that night. Not because anything had changed physically, the same hardwood floors, the same cream-colored walls, the same family portraits lining the hallway, but because I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. I didn't belong there anymore. For 32 years, I had moved through that house without thinking. I knew which floorboard creaked near the staircase, which cabinet door needed a gentle push to close properly, which window caught the morning sun just right in the kitchen. Now, every corner felt unfamiliar. Like I was walking through someone else's home. Harold's absence made it worse. His reading chair by the fireplace remained untouched, his glasses still resting on the small wooden table beside it. I hadn't moved them. I couldn't. It had been his house too. No, our house. But apparently, that distinction no longer mattered. In the days leading up to that dinner, things had already started to shift. I could see it clearly now, replaying every moment in my mind like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together. Claire had begun rearranging things without asking. Small changes at first, moving dishes to different cabinets, replacing the hand towels I had chosen years ago with ones that matched her style. She said it lightly, always with a smile. "I'm just trying to freshen things up," she would say. I didn't argue. Then came the bigger changes. One afternoon, I found my belongings from the downstairs study neatly stacked in a box near the hallway. "I thought we could turn this into a nursery someday," Claire explained, her tone soft, as if she were doing me a favor. A nursery. As if my life, my routines, my space, were already being erased to make room for something new. Daniel didn't say anything then either. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, avoiding my eyes. That was the first time I felt it, that quiet, unsettling realization that decisions were being made around me, not with me. After Harold passed, it became even more obvious. Conversations would stop when I entered the room. Phone calls would end abruptly. Once, I walked into the kitchen and saw Claire quickly locking her phone. Her expression shifting the moment she noticed me. "Just work stuff," she said before I could even ask. I hadn't asked. At night, I would lie in bed, the bed Harold and I had shared for decades, and stare at the ceiling, listening to the faint murmur of their voices downstairs. Sometimes I caught fragments. It's too much for her. We have to think long-term, this house. They never spoke directly to me. Not until that dinner. Not until Claire decided it was time to say it out loud. Looking back, I realized something else. That night hadn't been spontaneous. It had been planned. I started noticing the pattern 3 days before that dinner. At first, it was small enough to ignore. Daniel stopped asking me simple things, what I wanted for dinner, whether I needed anything from the store. Questions he had asked for years suddenly disappeared, as if my answers no longer mattered. Claire, on the other hand, became unusually attentive. Not warm, not kind, just attentive in a way that felt rehearsed. "Are you feeling okay today?" she asked one morning while I was pouring my coffee. Her tone was light, but her eyes stayed on me a second too long. "I'm fine," I said. She smiled, too quickly. "You just seem a little off lately." Off. The word lingered in the air long after she walked away. Later that afternoon, I found her in the living room speaking softly on the phone. She didn't see me at first. "I'm telling you, it's getting worse," she said. "She forgets things, gets confused." I stopped in the hallway, my hand still resting against the wall. I hadn't forgotten anything. I hadn't been confused. But Claire's voice was calm, certain, convincing. When she turned and saw me, she didn't flinch. "Just checking on my mom," she said, ending the call without hesitation. Again, I didn't argue. That evening, Daniel came home earlier than usual. He didn't greet me the way he used to. No, "Hi, Mom," no quick smile, just a brief nod as he set his keys down on the counter. "Everything okay?" I asked. He hesitated. Claire stepped in before he could answer. She had a bit of a moment earlier. She said gently, "Nothing serious, just confusion." I looked at my son. He didn't ask me what happened. He didn't question her. He just nodded slowly, as if something had been confirmed. That was when I understood. It wasn't one conversation. It was many. Layered, repeated, carefully placed. That night, I went to my room earlier than usual. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at Harold's side, still untouched, still exactly as he had left it. Claire's voice echoed in my mind. "She forgets things, she gets confused." I stood up and walked to the dresser, opening the drawer where I kept our old documents, insurance papers, property records, things Harold always insisted we keep organized. My hands moved slowly, deliberately. I wasn't confused. And I wasn't forgetting anything. But someone wanted my son to believe that I was. I closed the drawer gently and sat back down. If Claire was building something, a story, a version of me that didn't exist, then I needed to see how far she was willing to go. So the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I said nothing. And I started watching. It was Harold who first noticed something was off. I remember the exact afternoon. The light coming through the kitchen window was soft, golden, the kind of quiet day we used to enjoy together. He was sitting at the table, going through some papers, his reading glasses low on his nose. Claire's laughter drifted in from the living room. Light, polished, perfect. Harold didn't look up, but he said quietly, "She's very careful with what she shows people." I paused, a dish still in my hand. "What do you mean?" I asked. He finally looked at me then. Not alarmed, not angry, just thoughtful. "Some people," he said, folding the paper in front of him, "don't reveal who they are all at once. They wait, they observe, and when the time is right, they take what they want." I remember smiling it off. Claire had always been charming, attentive. She brought wine to dinners, remembered birthdays, hugged me just a little longer than necessary. Everyone loved her, including me. Or at least, I thought I did. Looking back now, the signs were there. The way she would gently redirect conversations when finances came up. "Oh, Daniel handles all that," she would say, smiling sweetly. her hand resting lightly on his arm. The way she asked questions that sounded innocent, but weren't. Is the house fully paid off? Did Harold ever think about downsizing? What happens to everything, eventually? At the time, I thought she was just curious. Planning for the future. Being responsible. Harold didn't answer her directly. He would change the subject. Or give a vague response. And later, when we were alone, he would grow quiet in a way I didn't understand. Make sure you know where everything is, he told me one night as we got ready for bed. I do, I said. You've handled it for years. He shook his head slightly. That's the problem. I didn't ask him to explain. I should have. A few weeks later, I found him in his study, going through documents again, more intensely this time. There were folders spread across the desk, papers neatly stacked, a pen moving quickly across the page. What are you doing? I asked. Just organizing things, he replied without looking up. But it wasn't just organizing. I could see it now, the precision, the intention behind every movement. He was preparing something. I don't want you to worry, he said after a moment, his voice softer. But if anything ever feels wrong, don't ignore it. I laughed lightly, trying to ease the tension. You're being dramatic, I said. He didn't smile. I'm being careful. That was the last real conversation we had about it. After that, life went on as it always had. Dinners, holidays, small routines that made up a life. Until it didn't. Until Harold was gone. And Claire stopped pretending. Now, sitting alone with those memories, I understood what he had been trying to tell me. He had seen something I refused to see. And whatever he had prepared, I was about to find out why. I couldn't stop thinking about what Harold had said. Not the words themselves, but the way he said them. Calm, certain, as if he already knew how things would unfold, long before I ever noticed anything was wrong. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I opened the bottom drawer of his old desk. I hadn't touched it since the funeral. The wood still smelled faintly like him, polish and something warm. Familiar. For a moment, I just stood there, my hand resting on the handle, unsure if I was ready to see what he had left behind. Then I pulled it open. Everything inside was arranged with his usual precision. Folders labeled in his neat handwriting. Documents clipped together, nothing out of place. Harold had never been careless. I sat down in his chair and began going through the papers one by one. Property records, insurance policies, old contracts from the business he sold years ago. Things I recognized. Things I didn't question. Until I reached a folder I had never seen before. It was thinner than the others. Plain, no label on the outside. That alone was enough to make me pause. I opened it slowly. Inside were documents I didn't remember signing. But my signature was there. Dated, witnessed, official. I frowned, leaning closer, trying to recall the moment, any moment, when Harold might have asked me to sign these. There were dates tied to ordinary days. A visit to the bank. Updating an address. Small errands I would have thought nothing of at the time. He must have told me they were routine. And I must have trusted him enough not to ask. My fingers tightened slightly around the edge of the paper. I kept reading. Account numbers, transfers, structures I didn't fully understand, but I could tell one thing immediately. This wasn't accidental. Harold had been building something. Quietly, carefully, over years. Not just savings. Protection. I leaned back in the chair, the weight of that realization settling in slowly. All this time, while I moved through that house believing everything was simple, he had been preparing for something I never imagined would happen. Or maybe something he knew would. Downstairs, I heard a faint sound, Claire's voice. Low, steady, followed by Daniel's. I couldn't make out the words. But I didn't need to. For the first time, I didn't feel confused. I felt aware. I placed the documents back into the folder exactly as I had found them and closed the drawer gently. I wouldn't ask questions. Not yet. If Harold had gone to this much effort to keep things quiet, there was a reason. And if Claire was so certain she had already won, then the smartest thing I could do was let her believe it. The next morning, I went to the bank. It was a 15-minute drive from the house, one I had made countless times over the years. Usually sitting in the passenger seat while Harold handled everything inside. He always said it was easier that way. One less thing for me to worry about. Now, I wished I had worried more. The parking lot looked exactly the same. Same rows of cars, same glass doors reflecting the pale morning light. Nothing about the world outside had changed. But I had. Inside, the air was cool and quiet. A young teller greeted me with a polite smile, but I asked to speak with the branch manager instead. My husband handled our accounts. I explained, keeping my voice steady. I need to review everything. She nodded and led me to a small office in the back. The manager, a woman in her late 40s with careful eyes, introduced herself and offered her condolences. I thanked her, sat down, and placed Harold's folder on the desk between us. I'm afraid I don't know exactly what I'm looking for, I admitted. That's all right, she said gently. Let's take it one step at a time. She began typing, her fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. I watched her expression more than the screen. At first, there was nothing unusual. A checking account, modest balance, the same one we had used for years. Then a savings account. Larger than I expected, but still familiar. I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe everything was as simple as I had always believed. Then she paused. Just for a second. It was subtle, but I saw it. The slight shift in her posture. The way her eyes narrowed just a fraction as she read something on the screen. Is something wrong? I asked. No, she said quickly. Not wrong, just unexpected. She clicked a few more times, then turned the monitor slightly so I could see. There are additional accounts listed under your name. My name? I repeated. She nodded. Several, actually. I leaned forward, my hands resting lightly on the edge of the desk. I had never opened any accounts on my own. Never needed to. Harold had handled everything. Can you show me? I asked. She printed out a series of documents and placed them in front of me. One by one. Carefully. I looked down at the pages. Certificates of deposit, a money market account, transfers made over years, small amounts at a time, barely noticeable on their own. But together, the numbers didn't make sense. They were too large. Much larger than anything Daniel or Claire could have imagined. I felt something shift inside me, not panic, not fear. Clarity. These accounts, I said slowly, who has access to them? She met my eyes. Only you. The room seemed quieter after that. As if even the air understood what that meant. All of them? I asked. Yes, ma'am. I nodded once and sat back in the chair. Upstairs, in that house, Claire believed she was already in control. That everything had been settled. That I was just an obstacle, already removed. But she didn't know this. Daniel didn't know this. And for the first time since Harold's funeral, I understood what he had been doing all those years. He hadn't just been managing our finances. He had been protecting me. Quietly. Completely. I gathered the papers into a neat stack and placed them back into the folder. I'd like copies of everything, I said. Of course. I stood up, smoothing my coat, my movements calm and unhurried. I didn't feel rushed anymore. I didn't feel lost. As I walked out of the bank and into the morning light, I realized something simple. I didn't need to fight them. I just needed to let them keep going. And watch where it led. I didn't go back to the house that day. Instead, I drove to a small office Harold had once mentioned but never explained in detail. It was downtown, tucked between a law firm and an insurance agency, plain, almost forgettable. Just like everything else he had set up. The name on the door matched one I had seen in the documents from the bank. I sat in my car for a moment before going in, my hands resting on the steering wheel. For years, I had trusted Harold to handle everything. I never questioned it, never needed to. Now, I was stepping into a part of his world I had never been invited into before. Inside, the office was quiet, soft lighting, dark wood furniture, the kind of place where people spoke carefully and listened even more carefully. A receptionist greeted me, and within minutes, I was led into a private office. The man who stood to shake my hand introduced himself as Mr. Carter. "I worked with your husband for many years," he said. "I believe you have some questions." I placed the folder on his desk and opened it without hesitation. "I think he was preparing something," I said. "I just don't know what." Mr. Carter didn't look surprised. He glanced at the documents, then back at me, studying my face as if confirming something to himself. "Yes," he said finally, "he was." He pulled out a separate file from his drawer, thicker, more formal, and placed it beside mine. "This," he continued, "is the full structure your husband established over the last 7 years." 7 years. I felt the weight of that number immediately. While I was living my life as usual, he had been building this quietly in the background. Mr. Carter began explaining. Trusts, ownership layers, asset protection. At first, the terms sounded distant, almost technical, but as he continued, the meaning became clear. The house, the one Claire claimed was no longer mine, was not legally in Daniel's control. It never had been. It was held under a trust. A trust where I was the primary beneficiary. And more importantly, the one with final authority. I sat very still, letting that settle. "What about my son?" I asked. Mr. Carter chose his words carefully. "He has conditional access," he said, "but no controlling authority unless certain terms are met." "What kind of terms?" He paused, then turned the document slightly toward me and pointed to a specific clause. "In the event of misconduct, coercion, or any attempt to unlawfully remove the primary beneficiary." His finger rested on the line. "All rights are immediately revoked." The room felt very quiet after that. Claire's voice echoed in my mind. "This house isn't yours." I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I finally understood something she didn't. She hadn't just pushed me out. She had triggered something. "And there's more," Mr. Carter added. He flipped another page. "Your husband also included provisions regarding defamation and false claims that could damage your legal standing or reputation." I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't need to. I already knew what that meant. Claire hadn't just been trying to take control. She had been building a case. Carefully. Patiently. But so had Harold. For 7 years. I closed the folder slowly. "So," Mr. Carter said, watching me, "how would you like to proceed?" I stood up, smoothing my coat, my expression calm. "I don't," I said. He frowned slightly. "I'm sorry? I'm not going to proceed," I repeated, "not yet." Because now I understood something far more important than the documents in front of me. Claire believed she had already won. And people who believe that, they stop being careful. I picked up the folder and held it close. "I think," I said quietly, "I'll let things play out a little longer." Mr. Carter studied me for a moment. Then nodded. As I walked out of the office and into the afternoon light, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. Not relief. Not even satisfaction. Control. And this time, I wasn't going to lose it. I didn't contact Daniel. I didn't call. I didn't text. I didn't try to explain anything. Instead, I checked into a small extended stay hotel on the edge of town, nothing fancy. Just a quiet place with a kitchenette and a window that overlooked a parking lot instead of a garden I used to tend. It was enough. For the first time in years, no one asked me where I was going. No one watched what I did. No one adjusted things around me as if I were already gone. The silence wasn't heavy. It was clear. That evening, I sat at the small table near the window. The folder Harold had left me open in front of me. Every document now made sense in a way it hadn't before. Every signature. Every quiet transfer. Every layer he had built. Not just to protect the assets, But to protect me, I didn't rush. I read everything slowly, carefully, the way Harold used to. I made notes, dates, names, patterns. And then I started noticing something else. Transactions that didn't quite match. Small withdrawals from the joint account over the past year. Nothing dramatic. Amounts that could easily be dismissed as household expenses. Groceries, repairs, miscellaneous costs. But they followed a pattern. Always initiated when Daniel was out of town. Always signed off by Claire. I traced them back, one by one, flipping through statements, comparing dates. It wasn't theft. Not exactly. It was preparation. Positioning. As if she had been slowly shifting things, getting used to controlling what wasn't hers yet. I closed the folder and leaned back in the chair. Claire hadn't acted suddenly. She had been building toward this. The same way Harold had. Only one of them had done it quietly. The next morning, I returned to the bank. Not to ask questions. To act. I requested that all external access to the secondary accounts be restricted. No alerts, no notifications. Just quiet limitations. The manager looked at me carefully. "Are you sure you don't want to inform the other authorized parties?" she asked. "There are no other authorized parties," I replied. She nodded. Within minutes, the changes were made. Simple. Clean. Invisible. After that, I made one more call. Mr. Carter answered on the second ring. "I'd like to review the property access rights," I said. "Of course," he replied. "Are you planning to make adjustments?" "Not yet," I said. A pause. "But soon." I hung up and sat there for a moment, the phone still in my hand. Back at the house, Claire believed everything was moving exactly as she planned. She thought I had left for good. That I had accepted it. That I was out of the picture. And Daniel believed what he had been told. That I was confused. Unstable. A problem that needed to be managed. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. Anger is loud, unfocused. This was different. This was quiet. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched as a car pulled into the parking lot below. People coming and going, lives moving forward. Unaware of what was unfolding somewhere else. Claire had made one mistake. She believed I would fight her the way she expected, emotionally. Visibly, desperately. But I wasn't going to do that. I was going to do something much simpler. I was going to let her continue. Let her take more. Say more. Show more. Because the more she moved, the more she revealed. And when the time came, I wouldn't need to prove anything. She would do it for me. I knew they would make a move soon. People like Claire don't wait long once they think the path is clear. Control, once tasted, becomes something they want to secure quickly. 3 days after I left, I saw the first sign. A notification from the bank. Not an alert, just a routine summary I had kept active under my name. A request had been made. Not by me. I didn't react immediately. I sat there in the quiet of the hotel room, reading the line over and over again. Property-related inquiry, authorization pending. Claire was moving faster than I expected. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Carter. "They've started," I said simply. He didn't ask who. "I'll pull the activity logs," he replied, "but if they're trying to initiate changes without proper authority, they won't succeed." I finished for him. "No," he said, "they won't." I ended the call and set the phone down. Then I waited. Later that afternoon, Daniel called. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom?" His voice sounded uncertain. "Careful." "Yes." A pause. We've been trying to reach you." "I've been busy." Another pause, longer this time. Claire was likely standing nearby. I could almost hear her silence through him. "There are some things we need to discuss," he said, "about the house." "Of course." "I see," I replied calmly. "It's just paperwork," he added quickly. "Nothing complicated. We just need your signature to finalize a few things." I didn't respond right away. Paperwork. Signature. Finalize. The words were too familiar now. I'll think about it, I said. Mom, it's important. I said I'll think about it. My tone wasn't loud. But it was enough. He stopped. Okay, he said finally. Just, let us know. I will. I hung up before he could say anything else. For a moment, I just sat there, the silence settling around me again. They were rushing. That was good. Rushed people make mistakes. That evening, I drove past the house. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. From the street, I could see the lights on. More than usual, movement through the windows, shadows crossing back and forth. Something was happening. The next morning, I received another call. This time from someone I didn't expect. My grandson. Grandma? His voice was quiet, hesitant. Yes, sweetheart. I think you should know something. I didn't interrupt. I saw Mom, the other day. He continued. She was in the kitchen. And he stopped, struggling to find the words. It's okay, I said gently. Take your time. She dropped a glass, he said finally, and then, she picked up a piece and pressed it into her arm. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Not in shock. In confirmation. She told Dad you did it, he added, his voice smaller now. She didn't know I saw. I didn't ask any more questions. I didn't need to. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. Are you coming back? He asked. I looked out the window. The morning light stretching across the parking lot. Soon, I said. And this time, I meant it. I chose a Sunday afternoon to go back. The kind of afternoon Claire would think was perfect for appearances. When I pulled up to the house, there were already cars lined along the driveway. More than usual, voices carried faintly through the open windows, laughter. Glasses clinking, the low hum of conversation. A gathering. Of course. Claire was celebrating. I stepped out of the car slowly, smoothing my coat, my movements steady. For a moment, I looked at the house, not with longing. Not with anger. Just recognition. Then I walked in. No one noticed me at first. They were too busy watching her. Claire stood near the center of the living room, a glass of wine in her hand, smiling as she spoke to a small group of relatives. Daniel stood beside her, quieter, but present. They looked settled, as if everything had already been decided. As you all know, Claire was saying, her voice smooth, practiced. It's been a difficult time for the family, but we're doing our best to move forward. A few nods, sympathetic murmurs. The house will stay in the family. She continued, we're taking responsibility now. Responsibility. I stepped further inside. This time, someone saw me. The conversation faltered. Then stopped. Claire turned. For a brief second, just a second, her smile slipped. Mrs. Carter, she said, recovering quickly, I didn't expect you. I know, I replied. My voice was calm, even. Daniel looked at me, something uncertain flickering across his face. Mom, you should have called, he said. I didn't think it was necessary. The room was quiet now, everyone watching. Claire set her glass down slowly. We were just discussing the future, she said. There are still some documents that need to be finalized. I'm aware. I walked toward the center of the room, placing my handbag gently on the table beside me. And I brought someone who might help with that. The front door opened behind me. Mr. Carter stepped in, followed by another man carrying a slim briefcase. The shift in the room was immediate. Confusion, tension. Claire's posture stiffened. What is this? She asked. Clarity, I said. Mr. Carter moved forward without hesitation, placing a folder on the table. He opened it, his voice measured and precise. The property in question, he began, is held under a trust established by the late Harold Carter. Daniel frowned. A trust? He repeated. Yes, Mr. Carter said, with Mrs. Carter as the primary beneficiary and sole controlling authority. Silence. Heavy. Claire let out a small laugh. Sharp and dismissive. That doesn't make any sense, she said. We've already started the transfer process. Mr. Carter didn't react. "You may have attempted to," he said calmly, "but without her authorization, no such transfer is valid." Daniel looked between us, his expression shifting. "Mom, is that true?" I met his eyes. "I didn't think you needed to ask." Claire's voice cut in, tighter now. "This is ridiculous. She's been confused for weeks." "Careful," Mr. Carter said quietly. That word landed differently. Claire stopped. "There are additional provisions within the trust," he continued, specifically regarding false claims, coercion, and any attempt to undermine the legal standing of the primary beneficiary. The room felt smaller. Claire's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "I don't know what you're implying," she said. "You will," I replied. I reached into my bag and took out my phone. Then I placed it on the table. "There's something else you should all see." I pressed play. The video wasn't long. Just a kitchen, a quiet moment. Claire, alone. A glass slipping from her hand. Shattering. Then, clearly, unmistakably, her picking up a shard. And pressing it into her own arm. No one spoke. No one moved. The room held its breath. And Claire went completely still. No one spoke after the video ended. Not immediately. The silence wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition. Claire didn't move at first. Her face had lost all color. Her eyes fixed on the screen as if refusing to accept what everyone else had just seen. That's not what it looks like," she said finally, her voice unsteady. No one responded. Daniel was staring at the phone, his expression blank in a way I had never seen before. Not angry, not defensive. Just empty. "Daniel," she said, turning toward him, reaching for his arm. "You know me. You know I would never." He stepped back. Not dramatically. Just one step. But it was enough. "I saw it," he said quietly. His voice carried through the room more than a shout ever could. Claire froze. "I didn't want to believe it," he continued, "when you told me she hurt you. I thought," he stopped, shaking his head slightly, "I didn't even ask her." He didn't look at me when he said that. He couldn't. Mr. Carter closed the folder on the table with a soft, deliberate motion. "There is one more matter we need to address," he said. No one interrupted him now. "Under the terms of the trust," he continued, "any attempt to falsely accuse or legally undermine Mrs. Carter results in immediate disqualification from any future claim to the estate." Claire let out a short, sharp breath. "You can't be serious," she said. "This is just a misunderstanding." "It is not," he replied. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. This clause is clearly defined and fully enforceable. The weight of those words settled over the room. Claire looked around, as if searching for someone, anyone, to support her. But no one did. Not the relatives who had been nodding along with her earlier. Not the friends who had laughed with her minutes before. And not Daniel. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice low. Mr. Carter met his gaze. "It means," he said, "that your wife has forfeited any legal claim to this property and associated assets." The words landed slowly. But completely. Claire shook her head, stepping back now, her composure slipping in a way it hadn't before. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You can't just—" "I didn't do anything," I said. My voice was quiet. But it stopped her. "I didn't accuse you," I continued. "I didn't argue. I didn't try to prove anything." I looked at her, not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just clarity. "You did all of that yourself." The room was still. Claire's eyes flickered toward the phone again. Then back to me. For a moment, it looked like she might say something else. But she didn't. Because there was nothing left to say. Daniel finally looked at me. Really looked at me. I'm sorry," he said. The words were there. But they came too late. I held his gaze for a moment. Then I nodded once. Not in forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. Mr. Carter gathered the documents, closing his briefcase with a soft click. "This matter will be processed formally," he said. You will be notified of any next steps. No one argued. No one objected. Because there was nothing left to defend. I picked up my bag from the table. My movements steady. The house was quiet again. But this time, it wasn't mine to leave. I didn't stay long after that. There was nothing left for me to say, and nothing left for them to argue. The house, that house, stood exactly as it always had. The same walls, the same polished floors, the same chandelier Harold had insisted on installing 20 years ago, even though I thought it was too much. But something fundamental had shifted. Not in the house. In the people inside it. Daniel stood near the fireplace. His shoulders slightly slumped, as if the weight of everything had finally settled on him. Claire remained by the table, motionless, her carefully constructed composure gone. No one looked at me the same way anymore. And that was enough. I walked toward the door slowly. My steps measured, familiar. I had walked this path thousands of times before, carrying groceries, greeting guests, watching my son grow from a boy into a man. Now, I walked it differently. Not as someone being pushed out, but as someone choosing where she belonged. Mom. Daniel's voice stopped me just before I reached the door. I turned. He looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in a way I couldn't quite describe. Like someone who had just realized he had been standing in the wrong place for a very long time. I didn't know, he said. I believed him. That was the tragedy of it. You didn't ask, I replied. Not harsh. Not soft. Just true. He lowered his gaze. There was a time when I would have walked back, placed a hand on his shoulder, told him it would be all right. That time had passed. I thought I was protecting our future, he said quietly. I nodded once. And I spent 32 years protecting yours. The words settled between us. Not as a weapon, but as a fact. I didn't wait for a response. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air was cooler than I expected. Late afternoon, just before evening, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it really is. For a moment, I stood there, looking at the front of the house. It no longer felt like something I needed to hold on to. Because I finally understood something Harold had known long before I did. A home isn't defined by who claims it. It's defined by who builds it. And no one could take that from me. I walked down the driveway without looking back. Not because I was hurt. Not because I was angry. But because I was finished. Later that week, I finalized everything with Mr. Carter. The trust remained intact, the conditions enforced, adjustments made where necessary. Carefully. Quietly. Just the way Harold would have done it. I didn't remove Daniel completely. But I made sure that access came with responsibility. And clarity. As for Claire, her name no longer appeared anywhere that mattered. No arguments, no scenes. Just absence. A few weeks later, I moved into a smaller place across town. Nothing extravagant, just a clean, quiet home with large windows and a small garden out back. It was enough. More than enough. In the mornings, I made my coffee and sat by the window, watching the light change across the yard. Sometimes, I thought about the past. Not with regret, but with understanding. Because in the end, I didn't lose my family. I simply saw them clearly. And clarity is a kind of freedom people don't talk about enough. They thought I would fight. They thought I would break. They thought I would beg to stay. I did none of those things. I watched. I waited. And when the time came, I let the truth speak for itself. That was enough. It always is.